I co-founded a tech consultancy, and we started right at the beginning of the crash. So I sort of agreed to join this business to look after their sort of sales and account management, and was desperately excited, going to join this, really progressive team who've kind of already done it before. They sold their last business to Accenture and thought we were going to take over the world. And then obviously Lehman Brothers crashed about sort of 3 months later. And I guess at the point I had nothing to lose. I just thought, right, let's just go with this. You're at ground zero. And I think because I have that as a wonderful reference point, it doesn't fill me with as much dread, the concept of building my own business. I know that it's possible. I know that I just need to go through the motions. I know that ultimately it's a process. Some of the sort of background to me wanting to build this business was I guess is grounded in my values really, is my deep belief in diversity. I really believe that women should be in more positions of power and empowerment. They need to be given opportunities that men were given. I think when people talk to you about postnatal depression, I was like, I can't imagine people having that, But it doesn't always happen how you hear it happens. And you don't realise there's different levels and everyone has a different experience. And tried to fit myself back into this life that no longer fit me, and I couldn't keep up. It's just, are you asking the basic questions of don't look for health in obscurity, look for it in, are you sleeping? Are you resting? Are you eating to nourish your body? Are you educating yourself when it comes to your own needs? Are you looking after your mental health? Are you exercising consistency? When you're in it, you do not know how you're going to get out of it, and you cannot see the wood for the trees, and it's only when you step away from it that you realise that there are other options, and that you can better serve the company that you work for. You can better serve your family if you yourself put yourself and your health first.
On episode 3 of the Pocket Mastermind Podcast, we speak to Julia Colleran from Strong Ambition Method about her journey from launching a tech consultancy company during the 2008 financial crash into motherhood, postnatal depression and corporate burnout. After discovering the benefits of strength training, good nutrition and prioritising rest, Julia launched Strong Ambition Method to support ambitious women in business avoid the same corporate burnout she had faced by leveraging the 3 core pillars of Strong Ambition Method: strength, rest and nourishment. If you'd like to find out more about Julia and the Strong Ambition Method, go to strongambitionmethod.com. Welcome to the Pocket Mastermind Podcast, Julia Colleran from Strong Ambition Method.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm very glad you could make it. So tell us a bit about the Strong Ambition Method, what it is, what you do, who you work with.
So many things that I think influence any kind of startup. And my journey, I guess, started 11 or 12 years ago. I lose track of time. Seems like yesterday, really, but it obviously is quite a long time ago. I co-founded a tech consultancy, and we started right at the beginning of the crash. So I sort of agreed to join this business to look after their sort of sales and account management, and was desperately excited, going to join this progressive team who've kind of already done it before. They sold their last business to Accenture. Thought we were going to take over the world, and then obviously Lehman Brothers crashed about sort of 3 months later. And I guess at the point I had nothing to lose. I just thought, right, let's just go with this. And I think the fact that I have reference points of knowing that you can succeed in like the worst possible moment of time, it forces you to grow a lean business. It teaches you how hard it can be. It teaches you to, cold call at the very beginning. You are very much you're at ground zero. And I think because I have that as a wonderful reference point, it doesn't fill me with as much dread, the concept of building my own business. I know that it's possible. I know that I just need to go through the motions. I know that ultimately it's a process. So even now it's still early days, and I think it's still, there's still sort of nerve-wracking elements and things that I'm learning for a first. I know that I just need to sort of get to the next milestone and not kind of think of it as, like, for example, doing this today, you know, let's just chip away at it. Let's not worry about the end goal. Let's focus on the process. And I think some of the sort of background to me wanting to build this business was I think it's grounded in my values really, is my deep belief in diversity. I really believe that women should be in more positions of power and empowerment. They need to be given opportunities that men were given. Now, I'm not going to go obviously into I'm going to just keep it on a very simple level. I'm not going to go into depth.
We're getting Natalia started on the big one.
You know, this is,
we might as well go out.
This is something that's... See you later.
It's another conversation we've had today.
You know, I know it seems very much on trend at the moment to talk about diversity, but for me, on a very simple level, it's just representing, you know, diverse groups in a company that are similar to what their customers look like, you know. So you can't have just a management team full of any particular one type of person that doesn't represent their customers. So from a very simplistic point of view, I just believe that it is what is right, and it is what should be done now. And for me, I knew my business had to be grounded in that. Now I sort of explored and went on a journey, you know, of what is it exactly I want to do, how do I want to best support women, how do I want to give them a fighting chance, what practical ways can I help them in this journey to get like say more diversity, get them into more positions of power. Like I said, it was a journey. I initially thought, you know, could I be career coaching? Could I be just asking those questions? You know, could I be helping them with interview process, just helping them get past that initial kind of sort of a gate. And after sort of a long, I say a year process of working with, I actually worked with an amazing lady, a business advisor, who just helped me work through what was important to me. What kind of, and I hate the overuse of the word passion. I think passion is, you hear passion all the time, and I think that's another thing. I'll come to park that for now. But what is something that thrills me now? My own journey with health and Strong Ambition Method is ultimately a health and career method. But my journey with health has been something that, again, has just been plugging away at it for probably 15 years, sort of plugging away, constantly trying to improve my health.
Was there a starting point of that you can remember, like a clear day that you suddenly, I don't know, you change your lifestyle or something?
So I think, that's an interesting question actually, because it never really it sort of just, you know, looking back in hindsight, it seems like it was it was very much this, you know, it was very much this point in time. But of course, at the time, it's not necessarily that conscious. You don't necessarily know that you're doing it. But in my 20s, I never really knew what to sort of eat, you know. And I think the first sort of interest that comes up with women, or the first thing you try and work with is you try and lose weight. I think this is the first focus that women have from a very young age, is the focus on weight loss, as opposed to, you know, which now Strong Ambition is about being strong. So I guess my first kind of understanding or self-education was Weight Watchers, and did it a number of times. I was, you know, I wouldn't by any way, you know, I don't really want to go off into saying, you know, I was overweight, but it was a lot to do with lifestyle. It was a lot to do with not being very educated, not knowing what to eat. And it does, you know, in your 20s, you can kind of get away with it. You don't really necessarily know, you know, it doesn't impact your energy. Yeah. You can just eat crap and you get away with it, don't you?
You did that, didn't you?
For a while.
He had me on his shoulder saying, it can't last forever.
It didn't. It doesn't.
No.
It's a natural drop off.
Speaking from experience,
Yeah, of
though.
course I was. I'm 5 years ahead of him, aren't I? So.
Dave's always said he's a fat man trying to get out.
And I can confirm that is true.
Sometimes I escape.
Definitely, I think I think a vanity aspect definitely is the first thing to kind of hit you, which sounds terrible to say, but that's what it
I
is.
think that's what's in the media, right? Everything is around magazines is lose weight. You've got celebrities with diet tips or videos, or it's all about weight rather than health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do see a trend. I believe we are ahead of the curve just about in that's changing, and that's wonderful. The real push on, like you say, the first focus was A, and then B, when you actually realise you can't because of energy. You can't actually turn up to your life with the energy that you need in order to be effective, efficient, and do a good job if you feel tired.
And certainly not if you're career driven and looking to go for bigger roles and bigger challenges.
Exactly. And I think the second sort of wake up call I had was definitely being in the type of role that I was in. There was a lot of sales, with any new business or with any young business, you're actively selling. There's events, there's taking out clients, there's that lifestyle. So you do tend to eat a lot, rich foods. You are ultimately drinking too much. And that was something that definitely impacted me. And it's something I've knocked on the head now. It no longer serves me. So for 6 months I have not drunk any alcohol.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's quite interesting. I've been toying with this idea of
curious
whether because I don't really drink very often. Occasionally, the thing I'd miss is the odd pint down the pub. I've got, obviously you walk past the pub there.
It's a lovely,
and I haven't been in there this year, but I quite like the idea of being able to just go and have a pint, and I haven't managed to get over that thinking yet.
That's
it's quite
the easiest
possible.
thing that I gave up was the odd pint. That's easy for me. It was the
big night
social. Yeah, it was the more with my friends being out and having drinks than meeting to have one pint down the pub was the bit that I easily cut out. And so when I cut that out, I didn't drink until I had a couple of glasses of wine in February, and then this weekend I had a drink, and that's it for the whole year so far. But that was easily done by not drinking the odd pint.
I genuinely think if there was alcohol-free wine, I would be.
And it was good.
Yeah. That's the that's the problem.
Free gin now.
I've tried that. I don't like it. It's horrible. But I'm not a big drinker either, and it just, if there was another option, but there isn't really anything. And if you go to a pub or go out with friends, there's nothing that isn't either filled with sugar, or caffeine, or alcohol. So there's not really much choice out there, but definitely you start to realise that it does impact you sometimes more than the one day afterwards.
So when you stopped, was there a point that really kind of just was the final trigger, or is it something that had been building for a while?
I guess I'd always so I was the sort of person that by no, the first thing that people say is, were you an alcoholic? Absolutely not. Was I dependent socially on booze? I think I'm an introvert. I think I can be shy initially. It just softens that initial, glass of wine in hand, softens that initial spike of nerves when you go into social situations. So I think there was an element of, dare I say it, dependency. That was probably more of a habit.
I think, well, you grow up with that being the thing.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a learned behaviour. I think for pretty much everybody, unless obviously
British way, isn't it?
Exactly. But I do see it changing. I see more. It's definitely more of a split, I would say. And there's more people, I think, that are drinking less often.
Depending on the group of your friends, the friends that you have, I think people are, if you have quite sort of forward-thinking friends, if you have people that are kind of quite relaxed about you changing, or let's say, evolving as an individual, they still want you to be around. I think ultimately they're very accepting of it, and I think actually sometimes people are kind of more intrigued, and I think also it's a challenge for me to then put myself in those situations and still have a good time. And I found that, you know, you're nervous to begin with, and then you just...
half an hour goes by and it's normal, isn't it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, and the beauty about starting a health business is it pulls everything into question, and you become totally accountable. I mean, I was fairly accountable anyway to myself and to others, but it really does force you into, you know, those final last things that you think, are they really doing me any good? Are they serving me? And I think also, so basically, to answer your question, where I've done like a Billy Connolly and gone like all the way around. It was there a moment. I'd always been curious, but I think there was a moment when I'd gone out for my husband's birthday, and it was just a civilized meal, and I decided to sort of top it off with a nice large glass of red wine, and the next day I was deeply hungover, and also having to look after my son, and I just thought, I feel really bad. I feel awful, but also I'm telling him I'm sick. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, I'm not sick. It's not just you suffering anymore. Self-imposed. Yeah, this is a self-imposed sickness. So that was the moment I was like, I'm done. So I sort of had a wedding to go to about a week later. I did one final, you know, all in, and then said goodbye, and that was it. And I've not missed it. The other sort of clear, I guess, realization of how important health is obviously when you lose it to a certain extent. So been a couple of little points, and I was rushing to get to a meeting with a guy, and I prepped for this meeting for days, and I stuck up notes, you know, and it was right at the sort of the beginning of my career in consultancy, and I'd really prepped, and I wasn't focusing, and I wasn't, you know, as we all say now, present. And I went Liverpool Street Station, fell down the stairs all the way from the top of the stairs to the bottom of the stairs.
If you're going to do it big. Go
all in. You know, and it wasn't like I was in heels, I was wearing sensible shoes, you know, it was totally... And the only person that asked if I was okay was, I believe, a tourist.
Really?
Everybody else ignored me. All the Londoners, you know, just ignored me. And you know, you're in shock. You get up, you get on with your meeting. I went to my meeting with blood streaming down my knees. It was like horrific. But what that ultimately did is I tore the ligaments in both my hips through that fall, but you don't notice it straight away. It sort of slips in, you know, sort of becomes, slowly starts, your mobility starts reducing. And then I had a lot of work to then try and fix that. So first sort of thing I noticed was I went to physio, and then went to Pilates and things like that, and I used Pilates to rehabilitate myself, sort of become strong again. You know, it's just simple things, like I was sort of, you know, like you take the ability to walk totally for granted, and then you start looking for lift access, and you start looking, you know, just because I wasn't comfortable walking in those moments of time. And you know, all right, so I rehabilitated over the course of a year. Done, brilliant. But it really kind of opened my eyes to the power of movement and the power of very specific training, but I hadn't by that point sort of really started to strength train and really started to weightlift. That sort of came a little bit later, after I experienced something different, which was with my mental health, was when I was pregnant, and after pregnancy, once I had William, I experienced pre and postnatal depression. So it was triggered in my pregnancy, and again, it's just so slow, and it happens on a daily basis, and it's just, you know, it's insidious, and I went back to work, and I remember I had a picture taken 8 months, so I went back to work 8 months after, and that was considered, I was asked to go back after 3 months. It wouldn't have been a bit, you know, I went back after 8. That was considered a, you know, decent amount of time, and even I felt like that felt like a decent amount of time. But there was a picture of me holding William on the first day, and I just look so strange. Like, really? I look like a sort of false smile, and, you know, thin and, you know, and I went back too early. And, you know, I tried to, so prior to that, I was commuting across Europe on a weekly basis. And there was, you know, there's a certain lifestyle, there's long hours, there's long days, and you kind of swallow it all up, and you kind of enjoy, you know, to a certain extent, you get off a little bit of the, you know, if you continue to do it, if you're in that motion, it's only when you get off that it's so difficult to get back into that momentum. So at the time, you know, it was exhilarating, you know, you're moving, you know, you're traveling, this is great, you're getting so many points, you know. Everything's about you, everything's about the points. I think I only reached gold, which is incredibly disappointing.
Sometimes you need some perspective.
Yes, exactly. It's that really important. But yes, sort of trying to fit back into that lifestyle. And I had, you know, I got a nanny and was prepared to sort of, again, just be, you know, out of town for 3 days a week, and just leave you know, William with either the nanny or my husband. It was like, in hindsight, I'm like, what a moron. Like, what was I thinking? But like, before you have a child, you have no idea of the emotional connection you can actually have with them. But like, when they turn up, you're like, oh, I actually like you. You know, a flaw in my plan. And so, you know, all these things, the kind of, you know, changed. And I think also before, you know, I totally defined myself by my career. I hadn't defined myself by anything else. And, you know, yeah, good person, all this, whatever. But I think when it came back to, you know, when I came back to what I had been defining myself by, it pulled so much into question. You know, it just completely floored me. I think I was a bit sort of unbalanced anyway. I mean, I wasn't like gonna throw William out of a window or anything. It wasn't experienced in that way.
You were gonna do a Michael Jackson.
I wasn't. No. It wasn't. I didn't sort of have any of those tendencies in postnatal depression, because I think when people talk to you about postnatal depression, and I was like, I can't imagine people having that, you know. But it doesn't always happen how you hear it happens.
It's not very well understood, I don't think.
Totally, no, not at all. And you don't realise there's different levels, and there's different. Everyone has a different experience, and you know, tried to fit myself back into this life that no longer fit me, and just couldn't. I couldn't keep up. Ended up sort of at the doctor, just kind of a bit of a mess, weeping, and she said, I think you've got this. And just having someone, just, you know, she sat with me for 50 minutes. I mean, it's on the NHS. This is phenomenal, really. I mean,
they're normally kicking out in 15, aren't they?
Incredible. Handed me a box of tissues, listened to me, and just having someone give me some validation. And she just sort of said, you know, she'd experienced something. She was, she's a doctor. You know, you define yourself by your career, and just sort of she was repeating back in a way that I hadn't yet processed exactly, and hadn't been able to put into words. She was she was almost saying it. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Penny dropped, and it was sort of one of these sort of moments of time. I spoke to my the people I worked with. They were great. They hadn't yet handed everything back to me anyway. So it was just the perfect time for me to just take. At the time, I just sort of took my hours down to kind of minimal hours again, and just sort of work part time till I kind of ramped up and felt comfortable. But I guess that was another point in time, is how do you self heal? So one of the first things I did was I recognised I needed consistency. I needed to start putting in, routine into my life where there isn't. There's sort of just this chaos. There's a chaos of having a child. There's a chaos of not knowing necessarily what I want to do with the rest of my life, and I think, again, in hindsight, I can say, oh yes, I planned that. At the time, I didn't plan it. It was just that made sense at the time for me to start going to the gym regularly. So I started going to see a personal trainer, and I'd seen personal trainers before, but it was always like, let's try and get me into that wedding dress, or let's reduce myself. And it was the first time where I sort of thought, well, why don't we change that and focus on strength? And it's just absolutely mind-blowing, and I would say it's one of the things that got me through depression and out of it. And it's a lot to do with hormones. Once your hormones settle, I'm not saying I owe everything to strength training, but just started getting me into that routine, that consistency. And it's those consistent habits that so many women do not prioritise due to putting everybody else before themselves, whether that be their career, whether that be their family, and men do this as well. The pure reason that Strong Ambition Method is focusing on professional women is because I was a professional woman, whatever. I don't know where I stand on that, but it's
just having a go now. Gone from pro to amateur.
Exactly. And I can't speak from a male perspective. For me, it was important to represent women because this is something that I've deeply experienced. So strength training is empowering. It works towards supporting your physical systems. It works on so many levels, mental, physical. It's also so incredibly important for women to strength train ultimately because we're more susceptible to osteoporosis and things like this, and arthritis. And there, I'm sort of highly summarising it. I'm also very interested in, and in recent years, very interested in biohacking. And the concept of sort of optimizing your body, but I think this felt to me more, most people aren't in a position to biohack. Most people aren't, they just got to focus on the fundamentals. First of all, they've got to actually, it's almost like pre-biohacking before you start taking all these obscure supplements or you start sort of hacking various parts of your body. It's just, are you asking the basic questions of don't look for health in obscurity, look for it in, are you sleeping? Are you resting? Are you eating to nourish your body? Are you educating yourself when it comes to your own needs? Are you looking after your mental health? Are you exercising consistency? Because I think so many sort of the ladies that I work with, part of it is an education, and part of it is just the beauty of having someone support them. Through a journey, whereas often they don't have anyone ask them, are you okay? And I think I tried to initially at the beginning overcomplicate my role, and perhaps I'll talk about more what Strong Ambition is in a moment, but initially I sort of thought I need to be this person, I need to be this person, I need to be this person in order to support these women. And I thought, actually no, I just need to pull in the experts, let people do what they're good at. From my perspective, I can, created this program, but ultimately they get to speak to me and get to tell me about their journey, and we do it together. We find, we look for patterns, and we get to sort of go through the program together, and I sort of just line everything up for them, individualised, but also as a standardised element as well. So
it's probably a good opportunity to kind of talk a bit about exactly what the Strong Ambition Method is. And exactly what your role is with working with these ladies.
Okay, so the Strong Ambition Method is built up of three core pillars, as we call them. But then there is also a fourth, which I'll go into at the end. But we'll just focus on the core elements to begin with. That is essentially strength training, and it is having them work with a personal trainer 2 to 3 times a week, depending on their availability. Don't work through your lunch. Go and do something productive. Go and come back after your training session and actually be in a higher energized state. The sort of the program that we put together sort of focuses on sort of key compound lifts, which is deadlifts, squats, bench press, and obviously there's some other work in addition, but I get them to focus on performance. So a lot of the time they're not just exercising for the sake of exercise, they're exercising for performance. So on day one, they will be a lot less strong than they will be on day 90. And I think a lot of them are quite surprised by how much they enjoy just that change of mindset to actually finally train for performance. Second of all is rest. Rest as in taking regular breaks, but it's also sleep. I didn't want to focus too much on sleep. A lot of people get quite anxious about getting enough sleep, and that is really just making sure they understand, you know, it's getting them to track, it's getting them to realise they can have a life,
Absolutely.
but still get to bed and wake up, you know, pretty much same time every day. Don't mess up too much with your sleep routine. Recognise that you can't catch up, you know, at the weekend on your loss of sleep. I mean, I used to think, you know, why do I feel so exhausted after 6.5 hours sleep?
Yeah.
It's because you haven't had enough sleep. It's real basic math, you know. It's getting them also to take rest, you know, is you know, ultimately they get hit in from work. And I'm just painting a typical picture of the ladies that I work with. You know, I know this doesn't necessarily mean everybody, but often they're getting in and then they're working again, and then they'll shut down their laptop at 11 o'clock and then they'll go to bed, or at least they'll try to go to bed. And where is the point where you're not doing something that feels like work? What is the point where you're not in front of a screen? And it's just making sure that they factor in time, and that might well be their exercise, might well be that's their meditation, the fact that they're exercising, that may well be their rest, but it's just factoring that in and being conscious about it. And then the third element is just really making sure that they are eating enough. Then they're not just eating a sandwich on the go at lunchtime, which I think is quite depressing. And is this what we've all done? You know, a sad sandwich at your desk.
It's interesting though, because I think like quite often people who are ambitious sort of see anything that gets in the way of just working, and you know, I've definitely got caught in the trap of that as something that detracts from your ability to perform or your output. And I think it takes a while to start realizing that when you make time for those things, that actually your ability to perform in the time you have left is actually increased. And I think it can take sometimes some time to, that initial period can be quite painful of working out how you juggle that, and I guess having someone there to help guide you through that process can be quite.
Did you have a sort of a moment where you felt like enough was enough, like let me actually just turn this around and start focusing on me? Was there a moment in time for you? Yeah,
so for me, I have a health condition, so I've been forced into that earlier than I probably would have otherwise done. And actually, although at the beginning that was and still is at times incredibly frustrating, because I can't always do what I want to do or push myself as hard as I want to in work or whatever it might be. I think that now I probably, the last few years, definitely think of it more in terms of actually I'm, in a way, grateful, because it's made me think of those things, and they've got me into starting in strength training. Like you started with Pilates as a sort of rehabilitation until I was strong enough to do something like strength training. But I definitely saw a big difference, and I think definitely it sort of made me make time for that in a way that I know my tendency is to sort of go absolutely 100% into work or whatever it might be that I'm focusing on at that time. And otherwise I probably would have ended up finding myself many years down the line in quite a bad way,
crashing ultimately.
And actually I guess for me that happened straight after or during university, and I sort of had to do it the other way around. But it's really interesting to hear your experience.
I love that you started off with Pilates as well.
Yeah, I know, as you were telling about your journey, I thought there's quite a lot of mirroring going on.
Definitely.
You should start a business.
Well, it's just when you were talking as well.
That's a really good idea for one.
When you were talking as well about kind of thinking about how you go about that, I think, you know, the values that you talked about, you know, and valuing your health and not recognizing that until something goes wrong is definitely something that, you know, really resonates with me. And I too have also spent a lot of time wondering, like, well, how do you help people with that? Because it's not an easy one to crack, and particularly combining the health with the career path, I think, is a very interesting combination.
I hope so. I think we all have our own stories, and I think once you have a decent chunk of career capital and enough sort of confidence in your story, I think it's becoming more the norm to then start focusing on that as a niche, and then ultimately a micro niche and I think what has been a challenge for me, but ultimately what's been incredibly exciting is within companies, there is a lot of move towards mindfulness, meditation. You do get yoga in a lot of sort of corporations, and there's sort of everyone's moving in the right direction, and that's fantastic. And what I like about what I'm offering, it's good that I like what I'm offering, isn't it? I'm a big fan. Is that it doesn't compete. From my perspective, yes, there's an element of I'm carving a bit of my own market out here, but it doesn't compete. It's in addition to. I'm not offering it as a replacement for mindfulness. I think all these things absolutely have a place. It's just something that is for perhaps is an addition. It's in case it's not one size fits all, is it? It's just another offering. It's something 100%. Where so much of what women experience is physical, and it is a physical response. And that's why I will say I'd say probably half and half. Half my ladies don't have children and half do. So it's interesting to see sort of the difference. But no matter what, I think all women sort of experience the cycles that goes with being women. I just felt that it was a missing piece. A very much let's try and help you retain and attract your women into your organisation. But also, it is a way to prevent burnout, which is very much a real cost for a lot of businesses. People think that you can fix that with some mindfulness. Well, you can't. It has to be a full body solution. It is the whole body that needs to be taken into consideration. I think that's basically the grounding of Strong Ambition Method is ultimately, if you are not sleeping, if you are not eating properly, if you are not strength training, if you are not resting, however rest may be, whether that is you choosing meditation or just simply going for a walk or reading, there are more ways than one to be mindful, but it's just focusing on the whole body as a whole, because your brain cannot work if you are feeding your body crap. And if you are not, actually moving your body, which our current lifestyle demands, we are sat down for so much of it. We're going to evolve with sort of these round necks. A, we'll take responsibility for ourselves, but B, I think large businesses also have to sort of start taking some responsibility of their of the expectation that they have of their staff. You can't keep expecting and not expect and ultimately not get some people that crash. I did notice, I've seen lots of different things. I sort of have a unique insight in that I was in a startup. We ended up being a relatively successful consultancy within tech and telco. And I ended up in a sort of a unique position where sometimes I'm an outsider looking in a little, in a bubble, but got some really unique insight of the teams that work. I think obviously the teams that I saw that were most successful were the ones that were diverse. It's basic stuff, isn't it? But also I did notice a correlation between people that did end up having nervous breakdowns and ended up taking sort of long-term sickness. They just worked, and even if they did once enjoy to exercise or fitness or whatever whatever they like to do, I did sort of realise that they were stopping doing that. And again, that's quite a crude analysis of mine that I've noticed.
No, but it's true. If you're working until 11 o'clock at night,
exactly, when
can you do anything else?
Yeah.
What seems to happen, and I definitely experienced this from working in London for a long time, and it's like a bit of a microcosm. It's definitely more concentrated in London than I would say outside, having grown up and worked in Oxford and stuff prior to that. There's the work right to the end, go to the pub, and then maybe get a takeaway and sometimes work when you get home, or you just cut out the whole middle bit and just go drink
all
work.
in.
Do you know? It's kind of,
yeah.
and it's a difficult thing to break the habit, especially when everyone else around you is doing a similar kind of thing.
Absolutely, you're institutionalized, and you actually, when you're in it, you do not know how you're going to get out of it.
No.
And you cannot see the wood for the trees, and it's only when you step away from it that you realise that there are other options, and that you can, you actually are, you can better serve the company that you work for. You can better serve, your family if you yourself put yourself and and your health first. You just have more energy to show up.
I do think there's, going back to your point earlier, that I think there's definitely there's an onus on the companies that people work for to allow that and to actually actively promote that as an important part of life and every day, because unfortunately a lot of companies are based on have a very strong culture of presenteeism, and I think if you did if more people did feel more able to get up in the middle of the day and go to the gym or whatever it might be, that overall you'd have a healthier workforce.
Absolutely.
But for people, sort of, as you say, it's that permission thing. People don't see other people around them doing it, and therefore they don't see that that's an option for them either. And I think quite often, unless you're in quite a senior position, it's quite difficult to be the one that starts to change that.
Totally. I totally agree, and I think this is it. The change needs to happen at senior management. One of the things I really enjoyed to begin with was how actually the ladies that I was working with, not only were they doing it for themselves, they were doing it for their team. And they say, I'm setting a good example, and there's another couple of people within my team who've also followed suit and started doing it as well. Use it as an opportunity to, and I thought that's amazing. If you can just sort of set that example from the top, make that acceptable, and I guess it's also how much more productive will your team be. Businesses are in the business of being productive. If you want your team to be highly energized and producing, and being effective, they ultimately need to be well. It seems pretty basic.
You would think, wouldn't you? But I think it's something that's really lacking at the moment. I think the business world has changed so dramatically in the last probably 30 or so years that it's now got to catch up and evolve to have it actually caring about how people live. The Gordon Gekko era of the 80s, working flat out, I think it needs to start to die out a little bit. And I think I particularly in your industry in advertising, and I get to see it from those angles, the amount of people that are working ridiculously long hours, that wouldn't happen if the businesses were paying by the hour, right? So they're quite happy for the presenteeism and for the overworking, as long as it's not costing them money. I think if we started to move more to a system where people were paid for the time that they were actually working, you'd probably see that time reducing because businesses couldn't sustain it, right? Is there a typical route where your clients find you? How do people tend to come across what you're doing?
So I think a lot of the business I get is through there is some element of referral, and I think even within a team, what happens is when I think this is people do feel better, they do start advertising it, they do, and I'm not saying advertising me, I'm saying they do advertise their own health, I feel so much better, and everything becomes a bit more of a ritualistic, they bring in their lunch which they've prepared the day before, so there's a bit, there's a visual aspect, isn't there? And I think people then sort of get caught up in the energy of that, what are you doing, who did this, so that's quite nice that it's through referrals, because it all feels, it's also, you have very real case studies, for the other person to see. It's like, well, just look,
it's not a person on Instagram, it's someone they know.
I've not made up a testimonial. They do exist. That's an idea.
Everyone else is doing it.
Why not? Yeah, exactly. And I think I think what's been challenged to me, and again, it's been something that I've been learning, I'm not in advertising. I'm not necessarily from marketing, but being in a kind of a young business where you started from the ground up, you kind of end up doing lots of things. So you learn, you're cleaning the toilets, you're all the way to going to meet the, C-level of this big global organisation, but here you are sort of sweeping the floors. Yeah. So I think you do end up sort of picking up along the way, and also you have to kind of self-educate. People are too busy to, although I have experience, I have had some wonderful mentors over the years, and I couldn't have gotten where I'd gotten without those. You definitely have to self-teach. You actively have to learn. So I think that's just an extra addition for me, sort of learning how to speak to these women, how to sort of draw them in, and it's I can't just give my story and expect that to reflect back. I have to sort of also think of, all right, how else, take some of the testimonials that I've used and sort of try and repeat that back to an audience, so something might resonate. So I'm learning as well. So any tips, I'll be like, very appreciative.
I don't think you ever stop.
No, and you shouldn't. If you stop the day you die. Most of them come to me feeling tired, and I'm gonna, some it's a very physical fatigue. Some people it is I'm emotionally tired. I'm fed up. It's there's a kind of there's a similarity, but it's a lot to do with they just sort of feel like they're right at the bottom of the heap, and they just need to start pulling themselves back up into put themselves back at this, priority, top of priority. So I think, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I'm quite interested in whether, when the ladies come to you, whether they're kind of really aware of their current lifestyle and the impact that's having, or whether they're just, I feel like crap and don't want to feel like crap, or whether they have any kind of, how many people have a really concept of actually I'm eating crap all the time, I'm not doing any exercise, and I'm probably working really hard in a job that I'm not massively enjoying, or something like that. Yeah. And how do they, what's their thing, what they say to you when they come to you? Is that help, I feel like crap? Is it?
A lot of people don't realise how bad they feel. I will say, it's just, it becomes, whatever you experience becomes your new norm. Yeah. And you just expect that you're going to always feel like that. So I think, no, they don't always realise. A lot of them feel that they want to sort of take the next step in their lives. They want to take, the next sort of step up in their careers, or at least they're interested in doing it, but just don't know how they're going to do that. So a lot of them sort of come to me, it's a conversation. They don't know what they're going to get out of it necessarily. You have to go through the steps to really feel the benefits. I can tell them that they're going to feel better, but you don't really believe anyone until you go through it.
You're not going to say you're going to feel like crap at the end of this, so they're not going to sign up to that.
Exactly the same. So it's kind of a journey that we take them through, but a lot of them just want something more and can't always put their finger on what it is. But most people do recognise that they sort of say, and I will say, because this is what women do, is they say, I feel a bit sluggish, I've put on some weight, I want to be here. So obviously a lot of the time the first focus is the weight, and the first thing I have to say is this is not a weight loss program. Let me make this explicitly clear. It may be a side effect of taking on a healthier lifestyle, but I'm not going to be standing you on a weighing scales once a week.
With fanfares and
exactly. Although that has a place, but so it's just a sort of a desire to want more and to recognise that they want to do something for themselves, and then I think that's something that's repeated back to me. So I'm doing this for myself.
As though you're asking for permission, someone to tell you it's okay to do that for yourself.
It's okay, exactly.
And have you found, because I think one thing that's particularly interesting is the focus on strength training, and I think obviously that's very, very well established form of exercise for men, but I think increasingly so for women, but I think there are a lot of women who are still very hesitant to do it or quite intimidated by it. So have you found people respond to sort of that aspect of the program rather than, I guess a lot of women tend to be more focused on cardio or...
it's a shift. Yeah, it's definitely a shift in mentality, and it's for some women, they're very open to it, and others are concerned that they're going to get muscly to get too big. So, you know, I can't really, you know, it's a case of, you know, they have to trust me to a certain extent. It's not physically possible unless you are an outlier, you know, a type of woman who can build muscle very easily. It's very unusual that you're going to build up muscle like a man. You know, I sort of have to sort of make it, you know, sort of, there's an element of education in that.
Even men. I mean, what I've always said to Natalia on this is, go into the gym and look around all of those men lifting weights as hard as they possibly can, day in, day out, pumping down protein shakes and everything, trying to put on muscle and failing. You think that the lady's going to walk in and then accidentally turn out like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's just not going to happen, you know.
So massive.
The gyms are full of men failing to build muscle. Right?
Nobody's massive by accident. They wake up and they go, oh, shit, I didn't mean for that to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think a lot of it is, you know, you were saying earlier that, like, for a lot of people, the first thing is the aesthetic, and you know, even, you know, the women that although they feel sluggish, a lot of the time the first focus is the weight loss and how they look. And unfortunately, in the media, for men, yes, there is a focus on like muscle, but when it comes to women and promoting, I guess, the way that women look, that's not terminology that tends to be used. It's more about, you know, the focus is on less, as you said, and not on gaining strength or you know, even thinking about it in terms of strength. And that was one of the things I actually, when I first met Dave, I remember saying to him, like, I can't remember how I phrased it. It was something along the lines of, I can't imagine anything more boring than going into the gym and lifting weights. And actually
little did you know.
I know.
I haven't ever repeated that back to her, obviously.
I'm not sure that's entirely true, but you were right. And I think that, you know, what I was surprised about it was actually the satisfaction of lifting a heavy weight, which sounds really silly and basic, but I think there was something out of that gave me, I guess, a confidence that I wasn't really expecting, or a kind of enjoyment there that I hadn't ever really identified could be something that I could enjoy.
It's interesting that you use the word confidence as well, because I think that's something that certainly has been repeated back to me, that there is something very, you know, basic about, like you say, lifting a heavy weight, and then next week lifting a heavier weight, and it's that, you know, it's that sort of progression that you see, and then there's, you know, the physical aspect, there's just feeling stronger over time as well, and being able to being able to pin down your child when they're having a meltdown, you know, the practical aspects of strength,
throwing your husband around the house,
stopping them from, you know, running out in front of a road, you know, just the practical aspects of being strong. But it is very much something, so I think part of the way that so initially just using words and how powerful words can be, I mean, obviously, you know, you're switched into this, but I didn't know whether to say the word weightlifting to begin with, you know, use the term weightlifting, but of course that terrifies a lot of women. They're going to expect that I'm going to, you know,
turn them into a sumo wrestler.
What are you going to have me doing in the gym? You know, just the term weightlifting sounds incredibly...
Well, people think about the Olympics, don't they?
Yes.
And you've got all of this stuff that is not what you're going to end up doing.
Yes.
Well, there's an element of going into the gym and weightlifting that is quite intimidating, because it can be such a male environment.
100%.
Weightlifting is where the men are in the gym typically, and in the free weight section you very rarely find women in there, and even now in my gym you'll very rarely get somebody in there, and I have to drag Nikki in there really and say, like, if you want to do shoulders or something, go and sit there, because nobody's actually watching you, and nobody cares that you're there. You're just the same as everybody else, so just
and you have
go
absolutely
and do
a
that.
Right to be there.
Absolutely.
But it's daunting as well if you don't know what you're doing. I mean, I remember I went to a new gym in London recently, and the gym we go to is quite small, and I went to this gym, and they were like, okay, so this is the I can't remember what they called the downstairs gym, and then like, upstairs is the performance gym. So I went into the sort of first gym, and there weren't really any free weights in there, so I sort of walked upstairs, and I walked into this massive room filled with quite serious looking men, you know, doing lifting weights and free weights, and I'd been going to the gym for a few years by this point, and I was like, okay, I'll just I'll stay here and I'll go ahead with it. But it took a second, and I just that was a real moment where I think because I'd started going with you, that was a bit easier for me. But to walk in there by myself, and I thought, God, if this was the first time you'd come in here and you came in here by yourself, that would be quite intimidating. And actually, I think that's where there is a real value in having someone who sort of can help you navigate that, and make it a bit less daunting and a bit easier to know where to start. And you go in there with purpose of like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
And this is the beauty of using a personal trainer. Is and this was part of my journey as well. You're going into the weight section with someone that's there for you. They're setting up the rack for you. They're putting the weights on. They're doing everything so you don't have to do, and you just turn up. It's also just giving you the confidence, like you say, going back to confidence, and that in itself is empowering. And I think learning how to do these, learning the principles of strength training, learning the principles of weightlifting, is necessary to then be able to go and do that yourself. And it takes a while. I mean, it's not going to be something that's necessarily going to happen after 90 days, and the program is 90 days, but it's certainly going to be something you'd be prepared to sort of consider. I can possibly set this up if I feel confident. It's just doing it again and again and again. But it's interesting that you picked up on weightlifting, strength training. I found that strength training is sort of a better use of terminology.
I think so.
It's not quite as terrifying, and there is more of an it's so acceptable now for women to strength train.
Well, the one good thing that's come from Instagram is there are more women training with weights and posting images, and I think there's a better body image coming around as a result of that people actually then, it's not skinny that we're trying to attain, it's actually an athletic human body that's able to do tasks. And I think
and seeing what you have to do to get that.
And I think for all of the possible negatives of social media, in particular Instagram, I think there are some good things that have come out of it, and that's definitely one.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I was thinking exactly that yesterday, actually, in that I'm part of this Facebook group, and there's, I don't know how many thousands of women on it, and it's just called Barbell Beauties, and it is just women who weight train. They do all sorts of some are CrossFitters, some are Olympic lifters, some just beginners and just finding their journey. But it's this wonderful. They're just navigating this something that's been fairly new to women, and finding the strength that comes from it, but also finding the I've never been in such a group where there's just such purity of conversation. There's no one tearing the other person down. It's just really nice. And I'm on mixed groups as well, like Olympic lifting groups, and there's always someone that's there who knows better than everybody else, on the thread. And there's, always someone that's saying, your technique is wrong, when it's fairly subjective. There are different ways to skin a cat. But it just does feel like we're part of something very, very special. And I think that's the other thing, coming full circle to the social element. I do believe in, one-to-one accountability, and that you're accountable to turn up to a personal trainer until you can be self-disciplined to turn up for yourself. You have to turn up for someone else. So I do believe in that. So they ultimately are accountable to me as the Strong Ambition Method coach. I'm an expert on the program, so therefore I am the expert because I created it. So I'm a coach that can obviously coach them through the method and just go through, follow patterns. But also I'm a qualified weightlifting coach as well, which is a nice to have.
It is nice to have.
But there's a fourth element which I said, it's the social element. So what we're trying to do also is, particularly in companies, is just creating units of women whereby we're actually, yes, they'll do the things that are 1-to-1 and 1-to-2, but then there is a an element of a group work as well that comes from maybe, you know, doing a group Pilates session together, and just bringing this sort of shared journey where they're all on it together, and ultimately just creating that network of women within a company, which can then you know, particularly if it's like let's say for example it's a group of women who've just come back after maternity leave, it's a very lonely time, so it just brings them all together, shared experience, and then once they have finished the program they get to sort of go back off into their own sort of areas of the business, but they can always come back and they always have that sort of shared connection. So it's just sort of sharing things with other people.
So you have clients come from different angles, I suppose. So do you work with companies,
individuals
and companies,
correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's important to offer it on an individual basis, but I think the real power comes when you can work with large organisations.
Definitely.
That to me is what thrills me, is how do we change, going back to, you know, sort of how do we ultimately change the structure of these businesses? How do we make them more acceptable, that people need a life, they need health, how do we get them to shift from a short-term shareholder mentality to more of a mid to long-term, you know, mentality? And it's, you know, you're not going to change that overnight, but I'm thinking 40 years maybe. We just start plugging away at it now, you know.
Well, if you don't start, it's definitely not going to happen. I think
exactly.
I think it's definitely time for change across the way we work. I think I said that previously, and I think particularly with diversity, I think there's a massive opportunity for that to be a catalyst for lots of change. I think as diversity and inclusion becomes more of a consciousness, then that encompasses working hours and conditions and all of the rest of it. It's not just about whether you're a man, woman, black, white, whatever it is. It is about how do you work, where do you work, and all the rest of it. So any point into that, I think, is a good catalyst for that to happen. So
just creating an environment that people can actually excel, and everyone can excel, and identifying where that needs to have some flexibility to do so.
What is the process of you finding a PT, because obviously there's millions of people, millions of gyms, millions of PTs. How do you find one, and do you have to brief them because it's your method that you need them to teach rather than what they would do all of the time?
Yeah, no, that's a really nice question, because there is a vetting process, because there is a trust that these ladies are handing over to me, that I'm going to set them up with someone that is incredibly experienced, but, you know, who I've actually trained with.
So you put them through the...
I do, I made them train me, and actually, to be honest, they go all in as well, so the next day I can't walk, which is superb. And you know, there's me going, I know what I'm doing, and then they always teach me something new, which is great. And you should never you should never become complacent. But so I've got, over the years, I have used a number of personal trainers, and I've gotten to have a solid understanding. And also when I sort of did my coach training, which is by no means I'm not a personal trainer. It's very different. They are far more experienced than I am. Mine was more a case of just to have a basic knowledge to be able to put together a program. I wanted to be able to put my own programs together, so that was useful. But I use it's a network of trust, really. It's, you know, if I'm already working with a personal trainer, then it's like, who can you recommend me? Right. And you are on the hook for that recommendation. You know, I'm like, and then I will ultimately vet them. But their training has to be, very much focused on strength, and, you know, very comfortable with like all the standard lifts and things like that. But it's a lot to do with experience, and also, do they have the, are they going to necessarily fit with that individual? Because some people, I think they're not going to get on, and having worked in sort of consultancy, I'm almost like a matchmaker, you know, for company to, you know, person to company, you know. So I've sort of over the years have gotten, I think that's one of my strengths is finding the right people. I'm not necessarily an expert myself, you know, but I can always find the experts. So it's like, that's my strength.
You can't be an expert at everything, can you? I mean, it's
no,
not possible,
exactly. So, so I just take them through, get them to, you know, I say, right, this is, for example, the type of person that I'm going to bring in. What would you do with her that doesn't fill her with fear from the day that, you know, she begins? And I usually get them to do an initial first training session together, just where they get to know each other a little bit, and they'll, you know, and so far so good. Everyone's always sort of trusted me after that initial, you know, session, saying I wasn't sure about him to begin with, or I wasn't sure about her to begin with, but I totally understand their training style afterwards. So it's a lot to do with just referrals is and you know how long has that person known them for? How long have they been in the inner circle, kind of thing.
What's the logistics behind gyms, and do people have to travel? If you've got a PT that works in this part of London, have they got to go and across town to go do that session?
So I take away as many barriers that I can. So the first thing I realised was that people won't go if you put it anywhere near their house.
Because they divert home before.
By that point they're done. They've switched off.
Don't go home and get changed.
So and you know, and likewise, if you put it too far away from their work, they won't go. So far so good. You know, I've been lucky enough to sort of work with people who work in organisations very close to an independent gym, or very close to a gym who has an independent trainer. So I tend to work with independent trainers who, you know, can set their own hours, and we do that. So we try to, you know, I try and get a gym within 0.5 miles. It's very much at the beginning where, you know, you find out, you're like, you know, you're circling an area, and then what I found and what I'm learning is personal trainers are just one big network. Right. You know, they have, you know, people that they prefer to work with. They have, you know, people that they'd happily refer. So it's just sort of using that really. And so sort of a bit of a learning process in the beginning. We did sort of a proof of concept, and this is how we learned a lot of the programs. So I put together what I believed would work, and then we proved it with a load of women who were prepared to get involved. And one of them was, where realistically can the gym be? You know, you've got to think about the logistics. So it's actually a really good question. I'm sure it will present more of a challenge the further afield I go. So I'm starting with London, but I'm sure as we sort of start moving out into Greater London, then obviously global, you know. That's the next step, you know.
Obviously.
You know, obviously, yeah.
London, New York, Paris.
Exactly. Then there might well be a point where I'm also creating gyms, and that's where it gets that, you know, that at the beginning was an interest to me. It's a woman, you know, the idea of having a women's weightlifting gym somewhere that's not, you know, basic, because I work so I go and work out in a weightlifting gym, but I also work out in a gym. It would be nice to have a combination of both.
A little bit less than just chalk on the floor.
But
not completely life fitness stuff.
Indoor toilets kind of thing.
That kind of stuff.
So that's something that certainly I'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. But at the moment, sort of, I think one of the things that taught me about building a business before is the element of being lean, and how important it is to be lean and not to over, you know. I could go all in, and I'd love to, you know, if I was to have loads of money, I could, you know, start splashing the cash on things. But really, I don't know which direction this is going to necessarily go in at this stage. I have an idea, but you never entirely. And you've got to always be ready to pivot. So, I love that question.
And how do you go about the nutrition side of things?
Because that's going to be my next question.
I think that's people can visualise the gym, whether they completely relate to begin with or not, but the nutrition stuff, I think, is, in my experience of speaking to people, is that's where everyone is completely lost. There's so much confusing stuff around what's good, what's not good. There's marketing that's really good for some stuff that you just don't need, and then people generally, if people like my mother who go, the sun will come along, she go, I'm eating healthy, which basically means she's living on salad and soup. How do you go about the education part for nutrition?
And there's also that belief that eating healthy means egg white, brown rice, and oats and almond milk only.
The Flex magazine bodybuilder diet of the 1980s. Of like, how do you get? Where the hell do you start? Because I think most people, there's no nutritional education in this country whatsoever. GPs aren't trained in nutritional education, which is bizarre. How on earth do you start?
Yep. So we start with what they already know, and we use that as a basis. So rather than introduce them to something that is, obviously there's so many things that are considered a good diet, but we just start with, okay, again, it's to do with similarly to just be close to the gym. Let's try and move them the smallest amount that they possibly can to begin with. Let's not sort of give them a brand new diet, as well as a brand new training schedule, as well as they're having to sleep 8 hours to 9 hours a night. So we start with chipping away. One of the things we do is we get them to commit to 2 days a week. So on the days that they train, we say, okay, just don't worry about the rest of the days. Let's just focus on 2 days. So for those 2 days, I want you to think about having the best 2 days that you can have. So that'll mean that you're eating for performance. Initially, before we get, so the personal trainer would typically work with them on their eating as well, and education. But before we get them to start doing anything, we just track what they do currently, because that may well be that it's okay, and it just needs a bit of tweaking, or it needs more. Often people just they just work through the day and eat a big meal at the end of the day, or it's just about getting them to be consistent. It's getting them to recognize the basics. So we start off first of all with the basics. It's like, if they're living on Diet Coke, the first thing that needs to go is that, right, well, do you know what aspartame does to your body? Do you know that it's a carcinogen? And just the basic stuff. It's just about sort of slowly giving them targets and tweaking. We don't try and do a massive overhaul. It's just about regular small changes and an education. The other thing that I'm quite happily will do is I sort of say to them, if you want to send me a message at the weekend about what they need to eat, I'll be like, I happily give them some guidance. So there's one lady who really went on a big sort of really self-educated herself. She really took it upon herself to start learning, and that's where and that's when the magic happens. Is actually when they start taking ownership. Is not I will eat what you tell me to eat, but it's I will recognise what's good for me and what's I don't like. Actually, I don't like good and bad. I believe that you can have everything, but it's just all within it's just balance exactly. So I try not to say good and bad. But she would say, for example, am I okay to eat? And she'd sort of sent over a highly refined, sugary cereal. Am I okay to eat this option? Or gave me another option of very sugary sweet cereal, because they're being marketed as health products.
I know.
That's one of my biggest bugbears.
Bone of contention.
And why would you know? You wouldn't know.
No.
You'd assume that what people are telling you is true.
Or in a world where Heinz, Heinz are able to put a big message that says 1 of your 5 a day on baked beans, but ignore the fact that it's highly processed sugar and salt, blows my mind. I don't know how that's allowed in this current day.
Yeah, agreed. And we start with the basics. We get them to eat real food, get them to remove processed food, get them to swap out their sandwich with something that they've actually cooked at home. So it's not expecting everything to happen on day one. It's slowly getting them to self-educate and slowly finding a path that works for them, and then teaching them how to eat for strength and eat for performance, and tell them that they need to if they don't eat don't eat properly before they train, the amount of energy that they're going to build spend by sort of training and lifting heavy weights, they're just going to pass out and they're going to feel terrible, and they're going to crash and burn. It's about just supporting your body to to the best of their abilities. And we just get them to track it essentially, and we build up the days. We start off with 2 days, and then we move to 3 days. Right, 3 days. Let's see if you can try and have 3 really positive days, and then we slowly sort of get in there until we've taken over their life. But it's just getting them to take baby steps.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Is not just having a meal plan that you then follow. It's building on the education, so self-education, so that they're able to sustain it and progress from that point on. I think, you know, when I started going to the gym 10 years ago, on the eve of my 30th birthday, it was a sense of mortality hit me really. And I remember thinking, well, I'm going to start going to the gym, but I'm not going to do anything else differently. I'll carry on. And it was a gradual progression actually from going to the gym that said, well, maybe I should probably stop smoking, because this seems a bit silly to go to the gym and smoke. And then it was, well, maybe I'll get some protein. Maybe I'll start to read about nutrition. And it was that gradual process, and it became an interest for me. But I think it does take quite a lot of effort, and I think to have that starting point is massively beneficial. Yeah,
it's just sort of getting you, it's having someone kind of push you on the way, and having all these sort of people, experts, who are able to guide you if you do have questions. And what we do have for the very, very time poor is we do offer meal delivery service. So that's a bit of a, that is a sort of a,
is that stuff that you...
Everything is done for them. So, you know, but you educate...
But is that stuff that you produce and then
we
deliver
have,
or use it?
We work with partners, at this stage. Again, you never know.
Exactly,
But, you know, it can educate you, because it does give you a sense of how big your portions should be. It gives you a sense of how balanced your meals should be. Oh, you know, I could do this. You know, you throw it all in a pan, it's been produced for you. You just put it together, but you think, I can do this. So there is an element of, you know, although we are completely supporting them during that time in that it's just arriving on their doorstep, there is still an education that we found that comes through that.
Definitely, when they're seeing what they're eating on a daily basis is different to what it was before. And even that can be enough to, you know, the pattern, like you say, they start to see that this what they're eating is different, and they could actually recreate that without needing to order it.
Well, especially when you start to see results. And I think that's sort of initially you probably do need a lot more support, and you need some external reinforcement and help. And then as you start to see change and others potentially see change, then you sort of have that extra motivation to do it yourself and to go the extra mile, because suddenly the extra effort or time that's put into that, you see the value of that in real life, rather than someone else telling you what that could be potentially.
Yeah, and I think, you're right. It doesn't, you know, it's been reinforced, isn't it, by those around you. But you don't always see results straight away, and it's just having patience in that process and stickability. That's the reason we did it. That's the reason we did 90 days. Is because, you know, it's the whole 66 days to create a habit. It does feel like it takes about 3 months to kind of let a new set of habits sink in.
Oh, at least, I mean, some things take even longer, right? It's a great book I read was Atomic Habits.
I love it.
A brilliant way of just adding, and I've kind of something I've naturally done most of my life. I live off a set of systems and habits that I just evolve, but it is a case of, and she laughs because it's
true.
I'm robotic in that way, but what I do is I add,
quite different in that
like Atomic Habits, I add a new little habit to something else you already do, and it builds and builds and builds. And I think this the same thing goes with the gym.
Totally. I loved that book. And one of the things that I found quite surprising from it, where I think he asked an Olympic coach, he said sort of what is the difference between the normal people and those that become athletes, and it's ultimately that they are prepared to do boring things day in, day out, and it's getting past the boredom, and it's like it's going past that fun, you know, stage or the new stage, and it's then ploughing through that. Is when things are no longer new. It's just making sure that you continue to 100%. Do it. Yeah, I really like that book.
Well, the other thing as well that he talks about, which really resonated with me from my experience going to the gym, is also if you do fall off the wagon, of just like accepting that, but then starting again. Because that's the thing what I've always found, that if for whatever reason, you know, you're ill or something and you can't go to the gym for a period of time, and suddenly you don't because normally you get into the, you know, every time you go, it sort of reinforces what you get from it, and the positive feeling you get from it makes you go again. Once you don't have that for a while, it's getting over that hump to get yourself back into that routine. And I think that was the other thing with that, when he mentioned it, I thought, oh, yeah, that's exactly that's exactly how I feel about going to the gym, and that's the times where I find it hardest, is when I don't really want to go, having not been in a while, and then I go and I think, oh, actually quite enjoyed that.
Quite enjoyed it. You never regret it, do you?
No.
I found this, although I don't necessarily, we're telling them the minimum, we sort of get them to train the minimum that is required to see, results, to feel results just twice a week. But there is something sort of miraculous that happens when you start training 4 to 5 hours a week. Not 45.
45.
That's my next
yeah, you replace your job with
I'm not surprised it's miraculous.
Can you fit work in around your training?
Exactly.
You look great quite quickly and then peter out. Dig yourself a hole.
That is when you feel compelled to train. And I think when I moved up to around 5 hours a week, I was like, why had no one told me? The way that you can, I always envied my friends who were, seemed addicted to exercise. And that was simply why, because they put something into most days of their week. And that was, I think, the next stage in my understanding. And I think, so I have there's a standard program with the ladies, but what I want to move to is, all right, this is number 1. And then there's a phase 2. There's a number 2 where we really, and that's where some of the biohacking elements, I think, what I'd be interested in exploring, where we really try to optimize, where we really increase it's like, okay, so let's take the training up to 5 hours and let's see how different your life becomes. It's just sort of, all right, how can we tweak what we've built? And it's also knowing that they're committed, because there's a great deal of commitment. And it's taking them on that journey to the next level, which I find thrilling, which is kind of creating, I don't want to say like a super being, but it is really like, how can you get the best out? We're in this body for, let's hope 80 plus years. Yeah. How can we be comfortable and healthy for those 80 years rather than, for the last 20 of them be in incredible pain, unable to walk up 4 flights of stairs? How can you actually work to longevity? We're going to be working obviously forever, aren't we? So how possibly. Can we ensure that we're healthy when doing that? So that's another kind of thing that particularly fascinates me. But
huge part of that, I think, is mindset. We expect to get old, and so we start to give ourselves a narrative that we are getting old.
Absolutely.
And if you get to 60 and you go, oh, I'm 60.
I'm old.
And every day I'm old. And I joke about it, hitting 40, but I don't feel old. I still feel like I'm 18, if I'm honest. I just don't want to go out as much.
Sometimes you behave like it as well.
I'm just a really boring, I'm a really boring 18-year-old. That's what But you can break that psychological expectation by changing your outlook early on, by doing more exercise, by changing your diet and starting to feel better now. I think that if you realise that actually in a space of 3 months you can feel better than you did 3 months ago, then you don't have to expect to progressively feel worse as you get older. In fact, you can reverse it and start to feel better the following 3 months. Yeah.
No, it's because I think we mentioned on the phone call to each other that there was something quite, because I turned 40 in April.
I'm 6 months ahead of you.
No, and actually I'm not in denial. I've never been 39. I'm 40 next year. So I've already...
It's true. No one's ever 39, are they?
I'm 40 next year. And I've started to be, those ladies those older ladies in the older generation who go off and travel the world once they're, they've become... once they've lost their husband, and then they have this, and they always go, guess how old I am, guess how old I am. And I've become that lady, guess how old I am. And people are probably going, 40, nearly 40. But there is something that...
Never put anyone in that position, by the way.
No.
You can't win.
I did get introduced. I've always been conscious of looking young, so I got introduced once by my CEO to Boeing. We had a meeting with Boeing, and he went, "This is one of my business partners. She's not 12." So I was introduced to,
good introduction.
Like, oh, great. So
she's got a work experience.
Yes, exactly.
I can empathise with that. Someone recently wrote on my leaving card, "Can't believe you've got a new job, only 16, and with your third job in the ad game." Like, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. you do become conscious of it. And I think you want to be particularly taken seriously, don't you? And you don't want age to be an issue. So I think I'm embracing being 40. I think it's quite liberating.
100%.
I sort of am finding this new found sort of self-confidence that comes with being middle-aged.
Well, statistically, people are the most successful years for most people are actually between 40 and 60 anyway. Yeah. Because you kind of grown up and got all the silliness out of the way is probably a good start. Yeah, and you started to work out which way's up, just about.
Yeah. Just about.
And what you care about.
That's the most important.
And how to focus on that and not all the other stuff that gets in the way.
Yeah, all the politics, exactly.
So you talked a bit about kind of your schedule. Obviously, being an entrepreneur and setting up your own business has sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap for working incredibly long hours, and you are inherently invested in that business in a way, in a stronger way than you might be when you work for someone else. So how have you found that transition, and balancing that with maintaining your own health and well-being and exercise and
looking after William and the family?
From the very beginning, I have to live and be very open and honest with myself, with my clients. I can only be as good to them as I feel. So, if I'm high energy, they benefit from that. So I've put in meetings with myself. Because, there are occasions where I've been like, I've got stuff to do. I cannot go to the gym. I cannot take this class. I cannot do these things. And I'm like, no, turn up. So one of the first things that I sort of made myself do was just turn up and just see that as a meeting. I sort of see it as a little bit of, kind of I am working as well. So I will kind of speak to the personal trainers there, or, you're sort of, you've got an eye, you're, or a class. I went to a class the other day with a great Pilates instructor. So I'm like, I've got
vetting.
I've got something that might be of interest to you. So, I do sort of combine it a little bit. I think you're always on. I do stick to a system. I do, I get up, and I never thought this, and this actually was never possible when I used to drink. Not that I was a heavy drinker all the time, binge drinker.
The British way. Breakfast,
at the weekends. But what I did find is I couldn't get up early. I did struggle to get up early. All right, I'd get up at 7, but I could never get up at 5:45. And now I get up at 6, not 5:45. It's just an extra 15 minutes.
Crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not mental. So
every minute counts.
Yeah. So I do. So for example, I do sort of start from 6. I start my day from 6. So the first hour of the day is just making sure I'm writing or I'm doing something for Instagram, and I have responsibilities. So I do make sure William gets to school on time. He got full attendance last term, I might add.
And you get a certificate for that?
He got a badge.
Did he?
Yeah.
It's not even his fault.
It's the badge for him. For him or for you?
Where's my badge?
I was probably not wearing it now.
I'll be having that, thank you.
Had nothing to do with you.
I don't think I ever got one at school for myself. I don't think I ever fully
parents
attended.
did though.
Yeah.
I certainly did.
And I have, and at the moment, I'm not, it's, I'm quite front loaded. I make sure that because having your own business, you can kind of design the business as you want to a certain extent. Obviously I do have clients, so I have to work around them, but it's making sure that you're doing calls Monday, Tuesday, you're on site with a client on this particular day, batch it. It's the beauty of having a business, in that I can, if I start as I mean to go on, it's design it a certain way that works for me, because ultimately what works for me is gonna be the best for my clients, but also for my for my family. And I don't I don't believe in sending emails early on in the morning. I don't believe in sending emails late at night. So I do sort of tend to be quite disciplined with, let's just make sure these are my working hours and let's stick to them. I mean, there's always going to be exceptions, but generally speaking, I can do that right now. There might well be a point where it all gets too much. And at which point, that's the point where I'm pulling in more, people to replace me. At the beginning, I'm not even a year into the business, so I'm not at that position yet. But I think it's knowing when to scale and when's the right time to scale.
Well, the beauty now is the ability to outsource to things like virtual assistants and pay by the hour, that you don't necessarily have to hire full-time employees, which was always historically, I think, one of the biggest barriers to individuals being able to scale a business, because you just couldn't afford to buy the software that you needed to use or employ the people that you needed. Now you can, as you need the support, you can get it.
I mean, what is available is absolutely phenomenal now. You just have so much, like you say, so much available to you. I set up my whole sort of website myself, but then pulled in some support from 5 Squid, which is the British Fiverr.
So it's a very British name, isn't it?
Yeah, 5 Squid.
5 Squid.
And this guy,
genius.
It's fantastic. Totally understood what I wanted to create. I had the content. He just sort of did the final design, the stuff that I didn't really know what I was doing on. And I mean, it cost me 150 quid,
I bloody should have done that, shouldn't I?
I can recommend it if you need any tweaks.
Just to free up some of my time, I think.
Yeah. But
it is true, right? It's so good to be able to get that. You just couldn't have done that before. I mean, you'd have spent thousands on getting someone ripping you off on building a website.
Yeah, and I have done that before. I've done that before with sort of an ego build. And I wanted to. 2012, I sort of tried to launch and I think this is I've known that I failed. I had my day job, but wanted also just to explore what else I could do. And previously, so I studied design at university. So I always felt that there was a need for a LinkedIn for designers, for artists, to a visual LinkedIn. So that was something I sort of experimented with around 2012, and I learned a ton from that, of just fantastically failing in it, spending a load of money on a website, on a company that never actually gave me a website.
Oh, really?
Just gave me smoke and mirrors, and it wasn't actually a workable website, and they just, the company, they went under, and what can I do, but there's all these lessons along the way.
Yeah, you're gonna learn. You can learn something from everything.
You certainly do, and at the time, you're licking my wounds, but now I'm like, I'm pleased I've done that, and pleased I've known what it feels like to fail, because then you just have to get back up again and do something else. So, yeah.
Well, we could go on all night.
I think we could.
I think it's been really interesting, really informative, really and I'm really pleased you came on.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much.
That's been amazing. Thank you for coming.
It was a really, really fun experience.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Pocket Mastermind Podcast. If you did, you can head over to pocketmastermind.com, where you can find more episodes in this series. And if you'd like to find out more about Julia and the Strong Ambition Method, you can at strongambitionmethod.com.